نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري يا إلهي خذ بقلبي للرشاد.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you for coming. This is our last lecture on the Islamic Discovery Week 2012, and today we have an interesting topic about converted hells, people who converted to Islam. Many people who convert to Islam have many problems, especially when they start practicing the religion, that they ask themselves how we start, where do we start. And thankfully there is an organization that's called Muslim Reverts Network who help people who recently converted to Islam or newly converted to Islam to start their best journey towards the best religion. Today we have two speakers, Emmanuel Humphreys and Stuart Mee, who will be talking about their stories and also more details about people who converted to Islam. And I will leave the stage now for Emmanuel to start.
I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight with Islamic greetings, Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be upon you. My name is Emmanuel Humphreys, this is Stuart. I'm just going to give you a bit of an introduction to converts in the UK, so you can get an understanding of how many converts there are and their background. So, first of all, how many converts are there in the UK? Well, there's not very much rigorous research about it, but it's estimated that there's approximately 100,000 converts to Islam in the UK today. And on average, 5,000 people convert to Islam every year in the UK. Okay. So that's the numbers. Still, it's small, but it's growing, and it's growing at a regular rate every year. And so who are these people that are converting to Islam? What is their background? A lot of people ask. Well, if you met a Muslim convert today and they were converting this year, there'd be 2/3 of them that would be female. Okay, so what we're finding in the UK and in the West in general, more women are coming to Islam than men. Okay. Their average age is 27 and a half, which is just a couple of years younger than I am at the moment. And if we look at their racial background, which is a bit simplistic, but it does give you an idea of where people are coming from. 56% of people converting in the UK are white British, so it's appealing to the British main society. 16% are from white non-British, and the remaining 29% come from non-white in the UK. So if you were to meet somebody today who was a Muslim convert, the chances are they're going to be female. They'll be 27 and a half, and they'll be white British. Okay. Now, why are these people choosing to come to Islam? There's a wide range of reasons. I'm drawing on some research that Leon Musavi from Lancaster University has done. He did a lot of interviews with converts, trying to find out why they chose to come to Islam. One of the main reasons that they talk about is the profoundness of the Quran. Okay, people find such a deep message in the Quran. The Quran in itself is enough for them to choose Islam as their religion. Okay. Secondly, a lot of converts refer to the contrast between Tawheed, which in English converts it to Islamic monotheism, and the Christian theology of Trinity. A lot of converts say that they find that they're far more in agreement with the concept of Tawheed. It's something that they find easier to get along with. A lot of people are searching for something spiritual, something that has a wisdom in a world that's become increasingly materialistic and increasingly secular, and also hyper rational. They're looking for a reason. Other people allude to influence that they've had from behaviour of Muslim neighbours or Muslim friends. And then another group of people, and this is part of my story, come to Islam through a commitment to a long-term relationship to another Muslim. I've been a Muslim for about over 13 years now, and may continue. I'm going to tell you some of my story tonight and how I came to Islam. But first of all, I'm going to put you over to Stuart. He does a lot of work with the Muslim Converts Network, which our brother was just speaking about. It's a local organisation, it's not a national organisation, and it's something that's been established in the last couple of years. He'll talk more about that, and he'll also give you his story on how he came to Islam.
Assalamu alaikum. Right, I was a little concerned that Brother Emmanuel was actually going to give you the whole of my story, really. The research that's been done by Dr. Masavi is it's pretty comprehensive, and actual fact, when I speak to a lot of people, and I hear a lot of people talking, in actual fact, I recognise so much of what they say in my own story as well. So really, well, where to begin? For me personally, I was one of those non-practicing Christians. I did the usual bits and pieces. There's an expression in Christian society which is hatches, matches and dispatches. So, which is births, deaths and marriages. So, and that's about the only reason I ever went to church. I think deep down, I never really had any particular difficulty with the oneness of God concept. It was exactly as Emmanuel's already said, that it's the concept of the Trinity that I never really understood. And to be perfectly honest, that was sort of one of the biggest turn-offs for me. But anyway, I suppose about 3-4 years ago, there were a few personal issues that I had, and sort of one of that I had, and started to make me question really what was happening in my life, but also what was actually going on around me as well, and seeing a lot of things actually going on, so that I didn't particularly didn't agree with. As it happens, a friend of mine at work is a Muslim, and that was really how you start. Well, how I started anyway. It's just a few questions and just a few answers. And the way I liked it was the fact that nothing was ever forced upon me. Nobody would come up and say to you, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. It was very much just sort of at my own pace, and that was what I found totally refreshing, totally acceptable on my part, and I think a lot of people actually respond well to that. Right, so it was about sort of 3-4 years ago. As I say, it was one of these things. I liken it to fishing. You get hooked, and you start asking questions, and there's more questions, and then the answers come. That it just generates more. That just generates more questions. And I was given a couple of books to read, and I found myself just agreeing with everything. With everything that was being said, and then it came as a bit of a surprise. They said, "Why don't we go to London Central Mosque and listen to one of their talks, because they have, alhamdulillah, they run a study circle in the afternoons." And I thought, whoa, this is a big series. It's a big serious step here. And I was thinking, well, what's going to happen? And surprise, surprise, absolutely nothing. I walked in, and it surprised me that just the range and the diversity of people were there. Everybody was so welcoming, and I'm afraid I can't remember what the actual subject was, but I just felt an absolute oneness with what was being said and how it was being said, and all the brothers there who I met were incredibly kind, And I found that that really touched me, and that really got into my soul. And I thought, yeah, this is really something that I'm really interested in. So about a month later, I went back to the Central Mosque by myself. And again, like I say, this is totally out of my comfort zone. You will not believe, I'm a creature of habit, and just doing something like that just really just is totally out of my comfort zone. I can't begin to explain. Anyway, I went along, and a couple of brothers recognised me, came over and talked, and there was one of the talk was by a young imam. And what he was saying, as I say, just absolutely struck a chord with me. He was talking about in terms of material wealth and knowledge. In terms of knowledge, he said, you look up to people who have that knowledge, who have that understanding, and when you look at the things that you actually have, and you thank Allah, and you look down to people who don't have what you have, and you thank Allah. And I thought, yeah, that is really, really, that is, I can really relate to that. And so that was, I suppose, in about the February or March time. And then, as I say, the questions just got more in depth, and the conversations got longer, and by about June 2009, it got to the point I thought, well, yeah, I'm happy. I understand pretty much what I'm letting myself in for. It got to that 80-20 rule. I was 80% happy with what I knew about it, and the 20% I thought, yeah, I can deal with all that later. So I went online and booked an appointment with the imam there, and turned up one Saturday afternoon, and for want of a better expression, I actually had an interview with him for about 15-20 minutes. Now, this is not what I was expecting. I thought, yeah, they'll come along and say, yeah, take your shahada, and welcome to Islam, and that was really what I was expecting, but it was nothing like it at all. He questioned me on pretty much everything, on my understanding, on what I was expecting, what I thought I knew, and it really was a warning, because I realise now that taking your shahada is an enormous step. It's a life-changing step, and he really wanted to ensure that I fully understood exactly what I was doing, because once you enter Islam, there really is no going backwards. And it truly is a life-changing experience, for the better, of course. And then, alhamdulillah, it's been pretty much a whirl ever since. I just wanted to know everything at the start. Just tell me everything that goes on, and just give it to me. But I found eventually that, it's more like a marathon, really. It's not a sprint in terms of knowledge. What you know, there's very much a steep learning curve, and alhamdulillah, the thing that I've really found is all about the intention. And providing your intention is pure and your intention is good, then inshallah Allah will accept what you intend to do. It's not been easy, and I suppose. So that was the June. Pretty much, I think I was up and running to 5 prayers within a month or so, because I figured, what's the point in not doing it? The same as Ramadan, that came around really quickly, and I found, people said to me, oh, well, you can just do one day on, one day off. I thought, again, well, what's the point? I've entered Islam. I've accepted what's actually been the challenge that they're given to me. So why shouldn't I do it? So I just did it, and I found it so uplifting. I went to numerous iftars, and Tarawih was mind-blowing, absolutely fantastic. the spiritual enjoyment and the spiritual oneness it's just absolutely incredible. Plus I lost a few pounds as well, but that's pretty much an aside. So as far as my family is concerned, I didn't actually tell them probably until September, October time, pretty much after Ramadan, and it was just it actually came up with a conversation over food, and beforehand I'd been round to my stepmom's and she'd sort of offered to cook fish and whatever, and that was fine, no problems. But then it came to the crunch came, and but in fact she was alhamdulillah being very understanding, very accepting, and wanted to learn, and alhamdulillah that has been a blessing as well. My brother, my brother was my brother, and sort of it's, well, don't you come around here preaching anything like that to me, so I'm not listening to that. But no, I think in time, inshallah, he will have found that that's not the person that I am. I don't come along, I don't do that. But friends, I took my shahada on Saturday, and alhamdulillah, we had a study circle for the very first time on a Tuesday. And I went along, and like I said, I was totally out of my comfort zone. Went along, and I met about 8 or 9 brothers, and alhamdulillah, I've never looked back since then. They were the kindest, most generous people, willing to give in terms of knowledge and assistance, and that I cannot thank Allah enough for. It was truly uplifting, and I count on those people as my friends today, and as a result, this is how MCN came about, the Muslim Converts Network, because that is a problem. Alhamdulillah, I was really lucky in that I was blessed by Allah to actually put into a place where I was around Muslims, and I could actually learn just the absolute basics. And so when one of Brother Umair suggested that we start this up, I said, yeah, I'm really into it, because the lead up to conversion it's really exciting. It really sort of takes on a life of its own, and the euphoria is fantastic. But then after that, it's, well, what's next? What is next after you convert to Islam? Who does what, when, and where? You go to the masjid. Do people come and talk to you? That's really quite difficult. So we've actually we set up, and alhamdulillah, we've been going just over 2 years now, and we've found that yes, we've been able to help a lot of brothers and sisters in the main. The 2/3, you said 2/3? 2/3. We've in fact probably found it's near 90% in the Reading area are actually sister converts. Although they're quite absent tonight, but they're very shy. So anyway, the as far as my life is concerned, I don't ever regret. The only thing that I ever regret is not actually converting to Islam earlier. But the thing is, though, Allah guides as and when people are ready, and that is what I've learned. And I'd love to have done it years beforehand, but it was not to be. So, but it's given me a new passion for life, lots of challenges. I've not only been involved with Muslim converts, but there's something called Quran Project, and inshallah, that really is a lot of dawah, where we give out free copies of Quran to non-Muslims, and also with the Berkshire Islamic Information Group as well. They who have a dawah stall in the town centre, and they. It's given me an opportunity to meet so many people, and so many nice people, so many interesting and well-educated people that have been unbelievable. And as I say, I really cannot thank Allah enough. So I'll save anything more for any more questions that you have afterwards. But now to brother, so Jazakallah khair.
I grew up in a seaside town. It's about 160 miles from here. It's called Paynton. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's part of the English Riviera, so it's a very popular place for people to go on holidays. So this town, it's an average seaside town in the southwest. Most of the people are British. My parents themselves, they're 100% English. And my mum's family goes back generations in the West Country. My father is from Manchester area originally. My family upbringing, neither of my parents were particularly religious. They did send me to Sunday school, but that was on my grandmother's request. Sunday school is where you attend church every Sunday, but they have lessons specifically for the children. So I went along to that for a couple of years. But other than that, there wasn't anything particularly religious about my growing up. I would probably call it a very sort of secular materialist upbringing. When I say materialistic, I don't mean a love of wealth and trying to acquire lots of riches. I mean a seeking for fulfillment in the world. Okay, that's what I mean by materialism. Okay, so that was my upbringing. I didn't really come into contact with many Muslims while I was growing up, because there was just really hardly any Muslims in Paynton, Torquay, and in South Devon in general. There was one family on my street who I didn't know very well, and as in common with many Muslim families outside the big cities, they owned a local Indian restaurant, but I didn't have much in touch with them. I went to a secondary school, and again, most of my friends not religious at all, and it wasn't something that people really spoke about. You study religions at school. They had religious studies, or I think they call it ethnic and moral studies now, and they went through all the main religions. What I remember a teacher telling me at school, when they spoke about Islam, they said, well, people follow 5 pillars in Islam, okay, and Brother Stuart's already touched on Shahada, which is the declaration of faith, Salah, which is praying, Ramadan, which is fasting, Hajj, which is the journey that people try to make to Mecca once in their life, to the Kaaba, and also Zakah, which is like a gift to charity that you make when you're above a certain income. So that was all that we were really told about Islam. I mean, Islam's just something you do. You just follow these 5 pillars. And I remember the teacher saying to me in the class, but if people are very religious, in Ramadan they carry around a bucket, and instead of swallowing their own spit, they spit in the bucket. Right, so I had this picture of these people in Pakistan with big beards carrying around buckets during Ramadan. You know, I mean, they were trying to tell us more about the extremes, but it's those images when you're growing up that kind of stick in your head. So there came a turning point for me when I was about 15 years old. Okay, mainly hanged out with people of my own age, but I got really into hip hop music, or rap as it might have been called then, which came from America but is now popular as a youth music across all of the world, and was really into that, and through that music I got introduced to some older people in my hometown who were really into reggae, which is quite a different kind of music, very popular in the Caribbean, did have a lot of popularity in the West during the 80s, and has kept being fairly popular ever since then. Now, they introduced me to that music, reggae, and for me that was totally different to the rap and hip hop I was listening to. Reggae's most famous exponent is Bob Marley, and he refers a lot to spirituality in his lyrics and faith and so on, and that I found this music really catchy, and I thought there's something going on with this. And also these friends that I've made, I best describe them as hippies. And I found these older people, they were really kind of accepting, they listened to what you said, and what I found that was different about them, to people of my own age, and being from the hippie generation, is that they all had something kind of spiritual in their life, okay? Not in the mainstream, they didn't tend to be Christians, they didn't tend to go to church. They tended to sympathise with Rastafarianism, the reggae, the religion that, well, or we call it religion or cult that Bob Marley and other Rastafarians follow, and or they're very interested in Eastern religions, Hinduism, yoga, and so on, and they thought there was something in this, and I saw these people, I thought these people are really chilled out, and they're really easy to get along with. So I think there's something about believing in something, and I'm going to try and find something to believe in that works for me. So went off to the library and got all kinds of books out, books about Christianity, books about Sikhism, books about Eastern religions, you know, and they're well stocked in the local library. Got through them, read it, said, yeah, I like this bit and I like that bit, like this bit, don't like that bit. And then I came across a book, and it was a book about an organisation called Subud. Okay, so this is the next stage for me in my journey to Islam. Okay, now probably nobody here in this room has probably heard of Subud. Okay, anybody heard of Subud at all? Okay, okay. Subud is the best way I can describe it is a spiritual movement that started up in Indonesia in the 1950s. There were quite a lot of spiritual movements that started up in Indonesia after the 1950s. Okay, and most of them stayed with links to Islam. Some people might classify them as being Sufi Islamic movements. But the different thing about Subud is that the person who established it, I think his name is Bapak. I think that just means father in that language, though. He has a much longer name, but I can't pronounce the Indonesian terms. He said, look, this is not a religion, we don't have a doctrine, we don't have any rules you have to follow. Okay? It was all around a spiritual experience called the latihan, which is like a spontaneous worship. You go in a room with people and you kind of feel the worship that comes into you, but you're totally aware of what you're doing. Okay? So I discovered this and I thought, yeah, this sounds good. You know, there's nothing strict that I have to follow, and I like the idea of having this worship experience. So I joined Subud when I was 17. Okay, so that kind of came into me. But one thing that Bapak said, okay, he said, look, this is not a religion. You need to find a religion. Okay, the ones that I recommend are Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Okay, well, it's not surprising because he was a Muslim himself. Okay, and a lot of the talks that he used to do about behaviour and so on, they did reflect Islamic values anyway, you know, in terms of modesty, in terms of behaviour, in terms of sexual morals. There was a lot in common with Islam. Okay, so that was the stage where I moved into Subud. So what happened next? That was just after sixth form. After sixth form, I went for a year to Zimbabwe, okay, in southern Africa. I went to do a gap year there to teach. Okay. So Zimbabwe is mostly predominantly a Christian country, but there are quite a number of Muslims that come, but they're mostly immigrants in Zimbabwe. They come from Mozambique and they come from Malawi. And while I was there, I was still practicing some of the Subud things while I was there, but I was the only Subud member in the whole of Zimbabwe. Okay, so all totally on my own. So I started looking into other religions again, and I thought I'd like to go and visit a mosque. So I went over to my neighbour and I said, "Can you tell me where the local mosque is for the Muslims?" And she said to me, "You shouldn't go there because they eat babies." Okay, so I thought there's a lot of propaganda about Islam, but I'm fairly sure this one is not true. While I was walking along one day, going through the township on the way to the school, like I saw an African Muslim there, wearing a hat, and I said to him, "Hi," introduced myself and said, "I'm interested to come and see the mosque." He said, "Yeah, that's great." So arranged a time. We went along there. So I went along to this mosque, and these people, they just moved there as an immigrant community and established their own mosque. A very simple building. And when I got there, there was a young boy outside, and he was just calling it right out into the township. Though most of the people are not Muslims, he's there and he's doing the call to prayer. He's doing the adhan. Okay, that's what it's called in Arabic. So I didn't really know what it is at the time. It's what I've learned since then. So I went into this mosque, and they said, "Come here. It's really nice to meet you." They said, "Yeah, just come sit down here." So came, sat down. They said to me, "We're just going to say some words. Can you repeat them after me?" La ilaha, you know how the rest goes, right? So I repeated these words. I wasn't really quite sure what was going on. And then after I did that, they said, "Right, come to the front." We all stood in a line. And I did this thing, and it really hurt my knees. Anyway, I left, and a couple of months later, one of the chaps who had seen me there said, "Oh, I saw you there, but we're just wondering why you didn't come back." And it was only after several years afterwards I realised what had happened. They thought that I'd really gone there and I wanted to become a Muslim, that I'd already decided, and as they weren't good enough at English to check out what my intentions were, they'd tried to facilitate my conversion at the time. But I can still say I've only been a Muslim 13 years. I can't add that 7 years on. It doesn't count. If you make a conversion to any religion, your intention has to be there. Okay, so that was another experience with Islam. Then I came back and I went to university, still a member of Reverts, and I did make Muslim friends while I was there. And that was quite common at university, but people didn't really talk to me very much. One of my best friends was a Nigerian friend, Isa, and we used to go out a lot together, but he never really talked to me very much about the religion. That was just it. He didn't feel there was any need, and so on. And I lived in apartments at university, and Lancaster at the time, the Management Institute was really popular with Malaysians. If you went to a management class, it was 95% Malaysian. So when they finished Ramadan, they had their big celebrations, Eid, and they invited me upstairs, and I had this really spicy peanut satay thing, and they had this rice stuff that they made out of into cubes, sort of pressed it down in a bucket overnight. It was really delicious. So during this time, I started to further indulge my passion for music, which had started when I was 15. Which continued while I was in Zimbabwe, and I got really into African music while I was there. I was also very interested in it at university, and I socialised a lot with the African society while I was there. So I originally gone to university to become a teacher, but halfway through I just changed my mind, and you often change your mind at that age, and I decided I wanted to go into social work. But I hadn't done a social degree, and the easiest way to do that was to go into voluntary work. So I got a voluntary position in a town called Worcester, which is about 60 miles from Birmingham. And I worked in a hostel for homeless people. And actually, the house where I was living, where the volunteers lived, it was in a street called Wilds Lane. And this was where all the Pakistani community lived. So I had Pakistani neighbours here and Pakistani neighbours there. And I do remember having a good experience while I was there, because I used to go and play guitar in the garden, and after playing for about 15 minutes, one of the ladies from the house, a couple of times it happened, they brought me a plate of sweet rice. So I don't know if they're trying to stop me playing guitar, or they're trying to thank me playing guitar. And the place where I worked was right next to the mosque, but still, I wasn't really taking a lot of interest at that stage, but I was getting a positive contact with Muslims. After working there for a while, I moved to London, and I got a paid job in a hostel for homeless people there. And I really got majorly into music. I started learning how to play guitar with guitarist from Congo, and in Africa, certainly in the south and east, Congolese music is a very, very popular form of pop music, and they've influenced music across the whole of Africa, all the way down to the south. So he was teaching me music, and I used to go to concerts as well. And as an English person, I'd learned lots of African styles of dancing to quite a good level. I don't know if good is the correct way to describe it. Shall we say I was proficient? Okay, so I would go to concerts, and so in London, you know, even though if you go to an African concert in London, if it's outside of the centre, most of the people that go to it are African, so they would say, hey, look at that Mzungu, that English guy. Mzungu is a word they use for a white person in East and Southern Africa. Say, look at that Mzungu, let's call him up on stage so people can see him dance. So quite often they call me up on stage and I do my moves in a couple of minutes. So my guitarist friend, he said to me, he said, okay, I've got this band from Uganda, and they're really good friends of mine. When I used to live in Uganda, I used to play with them as guitarists. So he introduced me to them, and he said they're playing at Stratford, which is in East London. So I went with him, and we went to see this concert, and there we are, you know, in this big hall of 1,000 people, 90% Ugandans, and surely enough, they spotted the Mzungu and said, come up and dance on stage for the next song. So I danced on stage, and you know, people cheered and so on. And after that, I went backstage and had a chat with the band, and they said, hey, it was really nice to meet you, and if you ever come over to Uganda, you should come connect with us, maybe we can do something together. And I thought, yeah, that's really nice, but I didn't take it that seriously. Okay, so just went back to carrying on doing my life, you know, working with homeless people and so on, and taking my interest in music. And about a month later, I decided to take the train out of London to visit a friend of mine, and I was sitting in the train, and this African lady was looking at me a lot. She came over and she spoke to me, and she said that, I hope you don't mind me talking to you, but did you go to that concert a couple of months ago in East London? I said, yeah, you were the one who was dancing on stage, weren't you? And this is where the phrase Africa is a village comes to mind. You know, a lot of people will say everyone knows everybody in Africa, you know. And she said, is that what you do for a living? Dancing? I said, no, but I'd like to, you know, I really enjoy doing it. And she goes, well, I used to live in a house that was next to the guitarist in that band. So I know them personally. And also, I've got a house in Uganda, and if you like, if you're interested, you can go and live there and give it a go, try and follow your dream. So I thought, wow, this is, you know, it's not every day that you go on a train and someone offers you to go and live in their house for free in another country. So I went away and thought about it, and I thought, well, you know, I'm young, I'm independent, I've got nothing to lose, I've got no children, so this is my chance. Let me go and try something and see how it goes. Maybe it won't work out, maybe it will, but I'll always look back on this. If I don't go there, I'll always look back on this point and thought, what would have happened if I didn't try it? So off I went, organised my plane tickets, went out there. I didn't end up joining that group in the end. The guitarist that she knew had set up their own group, and I joined that group, and we composed songs and so on, and I used to play in the band a couple of times a week, and gradually became better known. But it's hard to make a living out of music out there. And got featured in the newspaper a bit, you know, English guy comes over playing music and so on. So I got to know the members of the band, and one of the band members, he was very keen to come and introduce me to his family. Okay? So this is the next stage for me in terms of my journey to Islam. And he took me, I went back to his house, and he introduced me to his family. And that is when I met my wife-to-be. Okay? Okay, so... So I met his sister, and we got to know each other over just some months, actually. It reached a point it reached a point where it was difficult to support myself in music, and I felt that I needed to go home, but that I did want to keep this relationship going, and that I felt the best way to do it was through marriage. Okay, so I spoke to my wife to be, who kindly accepted, and she'd grown up most of her life with her mother. She came from a Muslim family, and in Uganda, Muslims have been there for about 200 to 300 years. Islam came there from the Arab traders. So her family had been Muslims for 200 to 300 years, and one of her grandfathers had been an imam in the village. Because she'd grown up with her mother, her parents had separated. Her father, on finding out about her plans, said that he really wants me to become a Muslim, you know, in turn, and to give the marriage a blessing and so on. And I said to my wife to be, if I'm to come to a religion, I can't do it for marriage. Okay, if you choose a religion, it's about your relationship to God. Okay, and it's a very big commitment. And I said I have to think about it. So I went away and thought about it. And of course, my experience, you know, as being a Subud member of the time, was that it was good to choose a religion. And I felt there was a lot of things in Islam that resonated for me. And that by getting married, it would be that sort of, that push that I needed to fully commit to Islam. So there we are, on my wedding day. I made my declaration of faith on my wedding day itself. Okay, so we had a circle of guys here. They told me they repeated the declaration of faith, which translating into English, it's I testify there is no God but Allah, and I testify that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Okay. That means Allah is great. I think I had to repeat it. Is it 3 times? I think I had to say it 3 times to show that I was serious about it. Okay, and then 5 minutes later I got married. I signed the contract. A couple of weeks after being married, I had to come back to the UK, and you can imagine I had not made very much money out of music, so I had to come back on my own. The British High Commission, in their wisdom, they have very strict rules about how you bring partners here that you've married. You have to show that you can support them. Okay, so I had to come back here on my own. I couldn't bring my wife with me straight away, so I had to work and raise funds. And I think Allah had a plan for me, because when I converted, my first Ramadan was in the middle of December. Okay, and I was doing a job where I was doing night shifts. So what would happen is I could eat all the way until about 7 in the morning, go to bed, wake up at 3 in the afternoon, and then eat half an hour later. Okay, so there were some day shifts, but that was an easy introduction. I remember on that first day of Ramadan, because I was all on my own in North London, and the first day I didn't fast, so I can't, you know, I'm just totally on my own and isolated. And that night, on that first day, I had a dream. Okay, and there were these 3 African ladies all dressed in black with hijab, and they just looked at me. They didn't say anything. I thought they probably want me to do Ramadan, so I better start doing it. Okay, so I continued to fast, and ever since then, give thanks, you know, unless I've been unwell, because fasting is not meant to be a burden on us, it's meant to be a blessing. Unless I've been sick, I've made the fast as well as I can, and may Allah reward me and reward us all according to our intentions. Okay. So, start to try to practice, gradually adopting the prayers, probably not as quickly as my brother Stuart here, but gradually getting there. And after about 7 years of being a practicing Muslim, I decided that at that point I needed to leave Subud. Okay, because I was going along to Subud meetings, but also being a Muslim, because I felt to me that Islam is a complete religion, and I felt that when the Quran was revealed, Muhammad, peace be upon him, he is the example for all mankind and for us Muslims on how to practice our religion. And I couldn't see that he did anything that was in Subbas, okay? So I felt there's a conflict for me. There's a confusion there. So I will remove that confusion. And I left Subbas, okay? And embraced Islam more. And I have found it such a rewarding journey. And many of the things that Stuart said about the blessings of Islam, I can echo, the brilliant friendships. But if I was to say the three things that I love most within Islam, I would first of all, I would say the Quran. And that's something, the Quran, the revelation revealed, and as Muslims we believe that it was revealed through Angel Jibreel or Angel Gabriel to Muhammad, peace be upon him. We believe that is a revelation, and that is never been changed. And when you read about the compilation of the Quran, people took such care to compile it, and we believe that it's a protected text. So for me, as I started to study it more and started to read it, I find it there's such a pure and profound message in the Quran. Okay, and that's even as an English person, I don't understand Arabic fluently or even basically, but even just by reading the translation, I find something moving in it, and something constant. You know, it's a timeless revelation. If we look at other texts from other religions, I'm not here to criticise them, but their scholars will admit that they have been changed over time. They have been translated into different languages, and we have the expression lost in translation. The second thing that I love about Islam is the practice of it, how it strengthens your faith. It's been designed for us, it's been designed for human beings by the one who made us. So the prayer is a daily reminder for us, and the fast is an annual renewing, it's an annual training. And I hope that in my life I will be granted the opportunity to complete the other pillars of faith, and all of us too, inshallah. And then finally, what I love, if I was to give the third out, three things that I love in Islam, I love Muhammad, peace be upon him. I love his example of how to practice this religion, and it's something that I've started to understand over time. Okay, Muhammad, peace be upon him, he's the most documented person, okay, in history, because he was such a remarkable person. His companions, we call them Sahaba, but his companions and his family, they took great effort to record what he said and what he did. And the scholars after that, the scholars in the generations to come, they spent great effort validating what these people had said and passed on. Okay? And remember, in Arabian culture, the verbal culture and memorizing what people said was a real skill. And passing on things verbally. But they took great time to check that what this person had passed on to that person was good quality and could be relied on. Okay, so not only do we have the Quran, okay, and that's the most authentic source, but after that, as Muslims, we have the example of Muhammad's, peace be upon him, and as illustrated in the collections of his sayings and recordings of what he did. So I know that if I want to know how to put something into practice, I can look to his example. Thank you very much for hearing my take.